Sophia Bennett had everything money could buy, yet every night she returned to her enormous penthouse and felt as though she had nothing at all. At 32, she was the owner of Bennett Global, a company worth billions of dollars, and magazines constantly called her one of the most powerful young businesswomen in the country. She owned luxury cars, private jets, designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and several mansions, but none of those things could answer the question that had been quietly haunting her for years: did anyone love Sophia Bennett, or did they only love her money? Since taking control of her father's company after his death, Sophia had received hundreds of marriage proposals, invitations from wealthy families, and endless attention from men who suddenly became interested whenever her name appeared on a business magazine cover. She had dated several men, but each relationship eventually ended for the same reason. One wanted access to her company, another wanted her connections, and one secretly borrowed millions from her accounts while pretending to love her. After that betrayal, Sophia stopped trusting people. One rainy evening, she sat alone in her penthouse while the city glittered below her window. Her assistant, Rachel, placed a cup of tea on the table and said, "You need a vacation." Sophia laughed bitterly. "A vacation won't help me find someone who actually cares about me." Rachel hesitated before replying, then stopped being Sophia Bennett. Sophia looked at her. "What do you mean?" Rachel smiled. "If you want to know whether someone loves you for you, hide the money." The idea sounded ridiculous at first, but the more Sophia thought about it, the more she became convinced that it was exactly what she needed. Within a week, she had made a secret plan. She would leave her penthouse, use a different name, dress like an ordinary working woman, and take a temporary job as a maid at a luxurious country estate owned by the wealthy Harrison family. Nobody there would know that she was a billionaire. She wanted to see how people treated someone they believed had nothing. Sophia chose the name Sophie Miller, bought inexpensive clothes, removed her expensive jewelry, changed her hairstyle, and left her luxury lifestyle behind. She arrived at the Harrison estate carrying one small suitcase. The mansion was enormous, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and gardens stretching farther than she could see. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Wilson, looked her over suspiciously before saying, "If you're here for the maid position, you'll need to understand that this house has rules. We work hard, we don't complain, and we respect the family." Sophia nodded. "I understand." She had never cleaned a room in her life, but she was determined. Her first morning was a disaster. She dropped a tray, spilled coffee on an expensive carpet, and accidentally turned on the wrong washing machine. Several servants laughed behind her back. But one person did not. His name was Daniel Reed, the estate's gardener and maintenance worker. Daniel was 34, handsome without trying to be, and completely different from every wealthy man Sophia had ever met. He lived in a small cottage near the estate and worked 6 days a week. His clothes were simple, his hands were rough from work, and he drove an old pickup truck that looked as though it had survived 100 storms. But Daniel had something Sophia rarely saw in wealthy people: genuine kindness. When he saw her struggling with a heavy box, he immediately walked over. "Let me help you." Sophia shook her head. "I can manage." Daniel smiled. "I believe you. But you don't have to prove it every second." He lifted the box effortlessly. Sophia stared at him. "Thank you." "You're welcome, Sophie." That simple kindness stayed with her all day. Over the following weeks, Sophia slowly learned the routine of the mansion. She cleaned rooms, prepared breakfast, polished silverware, and helped Mrs. Wilson organize the household. She discovered that working for a living was exhausting, but strangely satisfying. For the first time in years, people around her weren't treating her differently because of her wealth. They simply knew her as Sophie. Daniel became her closest friend. They talked during lunch breaks, walked through the gardens, and sometimes sat outside after work watching the sunset. Daniel never asked about her family money or where she came from. Instead, he asked about her dreams. "What would you do if money didn't matter?" he asked one afternoon. Sophia thought for a moment. "I would help people." Daniel smiled. "Then maybe money isn't the problem. Maybe what matters is what you do with it." Sophia began falling in love with him without realizing it. Daniel made her laugh. He noticed when she was tired. He brought her hot chocolate on cold mornings and once spent an entire evening fixing the broken clasp on her cheap handbag. When Sophia asked why he was so kind, he shrugged. "My mother taught me that you never know what someone is carrying inside." But Daniel had his own pain. Years earlier, his father had abandoned the family, leaving his mother to raise him alone. Daniel had worked from a young age and had promised himself that if he ever built a family, he would never walk away from them. Sophia admired him deeply. One evening, a storm knocked out the power at the estate. The servants gathered in the kitchen while Daniel checked the electrical system. Sophia followed him with a flashlight. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "It's dangerous." She smiled. "Neither should you." Daniel laughed. "Fair enough." Suddenly, lightning flashed across the windows, and Sophia instinctively grabbed his arm. Daniel looked at her, and for a moment neither spoke. "Are you afraid of storms?" he asked softly. "A little." "Then stay close." They stood together in the darkness, and Sophia realized she had never felt safer. But their growing relationship attracted the attention of Daniel's childhood friend, Rebecca, who worked at the estate. Rebecca had always wanted Daniel and became jealous of Sophia. She noticed that Daniel was falling for the new maid and began investigating her past. One afternoon, Rebecca discovered something suspicious. She found a photograph of Sophia Bannett in an old magazine hidden inside Sophia's suitcase. Rebecca immediately realized the truth. She confronted Sophia in private. "You're not Sophie Miller," she whispered. Sophia's heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" Rebecca held up the photograph. "You're Sophia Bannett, the billionaire." Sophia begged her not to tell anyone. "I just wanted to know if Daniel could love me without knowing who I really am." Rebecca laughed bitterly. "And what happens when he finds out? Do you think he'll forgive you for lying?" Sophia had no answer. Meanwhile, the Harrison family announced a grand charity dinner at the estate. Sophia knew she should leave before her secret was discovered, but Daniel asked her to stay. "I want you here," he said. "Why?" she asked. He looked at her with a smile. "Because you make this place feel different." Sophia nearly told him everything that night, but fear stopped her. At the dinner, wealthy guests arrived from across the country. Sophia stayed in her maid uniform, serving drinks and food. Then everything changed. The Harrison family's patriarch, Edward Harrison, stepped onto the stage to announce a major business partnership. "Tonight, we are honored to welcome our most important guest," he said. "Sophia Bannett, CEO of Bannett Global." Sophia froze. She knew there was no escape. A moment later, she stepped into the ballroom wearing her maid uniform. The room fell silent. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. His face changed from confusion to shock. "Sophie." Sophia slowly walked toward him. My name isn't Sophie. Daniel looked at her. You're Sophia Bennett. She nodded. Yes. Daniel stepped back. How long? Since the day we met. His expression hardened. So everything you told me was a lie? Sophia shook her head. My name was a lie. My feelings weren't. Daniel looked away. You could have told me. I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you'd see my money before you saw me. Daniel's eyes filled with disappointment. You didn't give me a chance to decide for myself. Sophia began crying. You're right. Daniel walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the ballroom. For the next several days, Sophia returned to her penthouse, but it felt emptier than ever. She realized that her plan had worked in the worst possible way. She had discovered someone who loved the woman she was pretending to be, but her lie had destroyed his trust. Then, one morning, Sophia received a phone call from Mrs. Wilson. Daniel left the estate. Sophia's heart sank. Where did he go? His mother is sick. He went home. Sophia immediately drove to the small town where Daniel lived. She found him outside a modest house, carrying groceries. When he saw her, his expression became guarded. Why are you here? Sophia took a deep breath. Because I owe you the truth. Daniel said nothing. I wasn't trying to make fun of you. I wasn't trying to test whether you were good enough for me. I was scared. Every man I trusted wanted something from me. You were the first person who treated me like I mattered even when you thought I had nothing. Daniel looked at her quietly. Sophia continued, but I understand now that I made the same mistake I was afraid other people would make. I judged you before giving you a choice. Daniel looked down at the groceries in his hands. Do you know what hurt the most? What? Not that you were rich. It was that you thought I would automatically care about your money. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. Daniel was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, I loved Sophie. Sophia nodded. And I loved Daniel. He looked at her. She's still you, isn't she? Sophia smiled through her tears. Yes. Daniel took a step closer. Then maybe I don't have to lose her. Months passed. Daniel did not immediately move into Sophia's world. Instead, they rebuilt their relationship slowly, this time without secrets. Sophia introduced him to her employees and friends as the man she loved, not as someone she was testing. Daniel continued working, refusing to become dependent on her wealth. Sophia respected that. Together, they started a foundation for ordinary workers and single-parent families, using Sophia's money to create scholarships, affordable housing, and job training programs. 1 year later, Sophia returned to the same estate where everything had started. She walked into the garden wearing a simple white dress. Daniel was waiting beneath the old oak tree where they had once watched the sunset. He held a small wooden box. I have something for you, he said. Sophia opened it and found a simple ring. It's not a diamond worth millions, Daniel said. It's just something I could afford. Sophia smiled. It's perfect. Daniel took her hand. I fell in love with a woman who cleaned rooms, burned breakfast, and laughed at my terrible jokes. Then I discovered she was a billionaire. But none of that changed how I felt. I only wish you had trusted me enough to let me choose you. Sophia began crying. I do now. Daniel knelt and asked her to marry him. Sophia said yes before he could finish the question. Their wedding was not held in a billionaire's palace. It was held in the garden of the estate, surrounded by the people who had known Sophia when she was simply Sophie. Mrs. Wilson cried through the entire ceremony. Rebecca apologized to Sophia, and Sophia forgave her. Daniel's mother proudly watched her son marry the woman who had entered their lives disguised as a maid and left his family. Years later, Sophia would sometimes laugh when she remembered her ridiculous experiment. She had pretended to be poor because she wanted to discover whether someone could love her without money. In the end, she learned something far more important: true love isn't found by hiding who you are. It's found when you finally become brave enough to reveal yourself and trust someone with the truth. Sophia had entered the Harrison estate looking for a man who could love a maid. She left with something she had never been able to buy with billions of dollars: a man who loved her heart, challenged her when she was wrong, respected her independence, and chose her even after discovering everything she had tried to hide. And whenever Daniel teased her about their first meeting, he always said the same thing: "I knew you were trouble the moment you dropped that tray." Sophia would laugh and reply, "And I knew you were different when you picked it up without judging me." Daniel would kiss her forehead and say, "Maybe that was the moment our real story began." And that was how the billionaire who disguised herself as a maid discovered that true love was never hiding in the mansion, the money, or the life she had built. It had been waiting quietly in the garden, wearing old work boots, carrying a toolbox, and loving her long before he ever knew her name.